Hey, 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 it's Dr. Cheryl Bryant Bruce, MD. You know me, the celebrity doc. And we are here with Chatters That Matters. And I am so excited about this show because we have got the most interesting guest on tonight. I mean, she is absolutely fascinating. But before we go to our guest, we're just going to do a little bit of quick housekeeping here. I am a bona fide MD, and if you hear anything on the show today that constitutes medical information, do understand there is no doctor-patient relationship between yourself and myself. And if you have any takeaways, then take them to your own doctor and ask about your personal situation. I am not your physician. Love you, but I'm not your doctor. This show is here to educate, inform, and entertain you. Chatters That Matters. I'm here with my co-host, the fabulous, handsome Hurricane H. And now, with no further ado, we are going to bring in our guest. Our guest tonight is insanely courageous, and she has got a life story that, boy, you think that Angelina Jolie and Mr. and Mrs. Smith and all of the shows that she did was fabulous. Well, this lady is the real McCoy. Welcome, Angelica Robles.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
I am so excited to have you, and I'm going to let you tell the audience who you are because I can do it no justice. You are just absolutely insanely amazing. Hats off
Thank
to you,
you.
girl.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I am a Forbes published international best-selling author, motivational speaker, mindset coach, and executive producer. I worked for the government for about 18 years. 2 of those years I was undercover. And now I am an author and I go around the world telling my story in hopes to touch, move, and inspire other women who have had a crazy traumatic life and turned it around and made lemonade with those lemons.
Okay. And when we say trauma and drama,
Right.
boy, you have really done it. Talk to us. Let's start from the beginning. What
Yes.
made you decide to go into investigative work?
Yes. So I grew up in Cicero, West Side. That's in Chicago, which is a suburb of Chicago. Very high crime area, very gang related area. I grew up in the ghetto pretty much. I went to a high school that had so much violence. We had, all the gang and all that situation. We had shootings. So I grew up in pretty much a very violent and volatile neighborhood. And so when I was 15, one of my friends was murdered, dismembered, and decapitated by the cartel. And as a 15-year-old, you can just imagine that this was very difficult to process. It was very difficult to digest. And it affected me. I had, major depression. I went into therapy and it really saved my life. I'm a big proponent of therapy. And so that kind of the pain that I felt from that catapulted me into wanting to work for the government, study forensic psychology, and then, do all that. So I feel like I picked my career based on my pain, really.
Right. And that happens so often that people do. A lot of psychologists go into psychology because they're trying to sort themselves out. So
Right.
you go into forensics, and what do you do with it? What happens from there?
So I get to college and I was very grateful to have such a good therapist when I was in high school because growing up as an adolescent is already hard as it is, but dealing with so much trauma and trying to process it really was something that I never thought I could process without therapy. I was suicidal. It's all in my book. I talk about the feelings and the thoughts of how you go through this and how your mind tries to piece it all together. And of course, you go through the grieving phase and the anger and all of that. And so as a young adolescent, it was very difficult. So I went to college and I decided to do forensic psychology. And I had also I was gonna do pre-med. So the original plan was that I was gonna go be a doctor. I was gonna be an MD.
Okay.
But things, that was kind of the path that was geared towards from my parents and my family. Everybody wants you to be the doctor, the lawyer. But
Okay,
I
let's stop there. Let's talk about that. Now,
yeah,
your parents want you to be this doctor, and you go sideways into something completely removed from that. How did your
yeah,
parents to that?
not good. Not good at all. I actually, the story was I actually got into med school and I was in anatomy class and they were going through all the tiny little ligaments in the hand. And I'm like, you know what? Screw this. So I walked out. I called my mom. I told her I'm not going to be a doctor. And she was, in tears because our parents lead this like road for us and they want the best for us,
Right,
especially my parents are immigrants from Mexico. But
right.
I remember I told my dad, I said, I'm gonna go work for the government, and my dad was like, yes, that's my daughter.
Okay.
But at least I had the
So
support
mom
of
and
my
dad were on different paths as far as what they saw your future looking like.
right. Right,
Okay.
right. Because the doctor path was the safe way, and you could see patients and work a 9 to 5, and you know this.
9 to 5, yeah. When I ever saw those.
Right, right. So I ended up so you can't join as a federal agent until you're 23. So I graduated college at 21. And so after I left, I ended up going to do criminal counseling case management for Cook County. So for those that know
Ooh,
about Cook
Cook
County,
County. Wow.
those are if you remember, or those that follow R. Kelly, that's where he was being charged here in Chicago. So I went to go work
Right.
for Cook
Right.
County.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Cook County is serious business. It is
Right,
rough territory.
right. So, and then this is a great story. I put this in the book. So the guy who had killed my friend was sentenced to death, and
Hmm.
he tried to say that he was not guilty due to insanity. He tried to play that card.
Right.
Well, my first internship, I walked into Cook County and Judge Lampkin was my supervisor. So Judge Lampkin was the judge that had put my friend's killer to death.
Uh-huh.
But in 2006, the death penalty was abolished in the state of Illinois by the governor, and so
Right.
now he still sits on death row.
Right.
So it's a crazy, it's
Yeah.
just
What
a
a convoluted
crazy
story.
form of events. I know, and I talk about this in the book because everything is just interconnected and it's wild. But
Right. Now
I
give us
can't
the
make
name
this
of the
stuff
book.
up.
Give us the name of the book.
So the name of the book is Through These Brown Eyes. This is the back of the cover, a little pieces of it. And it's
Uh-huh.
just a rendition. It's a memoir of my life, growing up, trauma, working for the government. And then, of course, leading towards the end of the book, which is the big reveal. So,
Right. Right. Now, are we able to talk about that on air? Is that gonna
yes,
okay?
we can talk about it. We can't really get into detail, but it's the end of book one. I'm
Right.
starting book two. So book two has already been started, which is going to be called The Power of Forgiveness. And
Uh-huh.
that's in the works right now.
Okay, so tell us this dramatic story that unfolded in your life once you became a full-on official investigator.
Yes. So I did 2 years of undercover work and I started in Chicago, and I started with corporate fraud. So whenever we mention corporate fraud, a lot of people think, oh, it's blue collar crime. So it's not blue collar crime. Corporate fraud is white collar crime, which is anything over $30,000. So we're talking about money embezzlement, we're talking about money laundering, that type of thing. And
Mhm.
so Ponzi schemes. So a lot of people automatically think it's big corporations, big businesses, but they forget that the cartels are considered white collar crime because it's organized crime and they're making millions of dollars. And a lot of
Right,
these cartel members are also business owners because they have all types of legitimate businesses that obviously were bought with drug money, but they're
right,
still
right.
businesses. So I started doing undercover work. And let me take you guys back, okay? So I'm 41 years old. I have no problem telling people my age. But when we were doing undercover work, there was no iPhones. There was no
Right.
checking in. There was that
Right.
stuff didn't exist back then. We were doing the hardcore old school surveillance where we're in the bushes, hiding in the vans, following you around. We weren't sitting behind computer screens like surveillance is done now. Now we could just hack into your phone and know where you're at. This is old school investigator work.
Now that's huge because, I hadn't even processed that, as you told the story, as I heard about the story, I hadn't even processed the conditions under which you would have been working. That's absolutely, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm shaking, I'm literally shaking because that would be absolutely
Terrifying.
terrifying going into that with that knowledge that your backup isn't a cell phone ring away.
It's not.
Wow.
And actually, till this day, I have a story. I share this in the book. Till this day, because I was taken, there was one time, well, there is more multiple times where your cover is revealed, but the one time that I was taken, I had two phones on me. And this will be a shout out to the telephone company, the cell phone company. I had two phones on me. I had my personal, which was a T-Mobile, and I had my government issued phone, which was a Verizon phone. The only way that they were able to pinpoint where I was, the T-Mobile, this is in upstate New York. So when I say upstate, I'm talking about the mountains in the
Right,
snow.
right.
My T-Mobile phone went dead. It was gone. Like
Uh-huh.
it was just completely dead. But my government phone was a Verizon phone and I had stuck it in my bra. So when they took me, as the van was going through the mountains, it pinged one of the towers that was
Wow.
there. That was the only way they were able to locate me. And that's when pinging was kind of now the where you check in, we can hack into your phone now and we can know where you're at, especially now.
Yeah,
It's so easy. But that
yeah.
was the only way they were able to locate me. So since then, I've always had Verizon.
Okay, yeah, me too. I've had Verizon for a gazillion years now.
Right.
Let's
And I'm
back
not going to anyone else.
right. Let's backtrack a little bit now. We've gotten this exciting story about the mountains, but still they have no idea what you were doing there. So let's give them the backstory as to how you
Yeah,
got into
so
the mountains.
right. So everything that I was doing was undercover. So I was either, and when I say undercover, a lot of people think that I was actually being part of transactions, which at some point I was. But a lot of the times when you do undercover work, you're trying to get evidence to convict on a larger level, right?
Mhm.
So you almost have to fit in. But when I started, I literally was following you around. Like I was hiding, I was in the grocery store with the hat, reading the magazine. Those things are true. And
Uh-huh.
just following you around. And a lot of it is because back then we didn't have the technology that we have now. So in order for us to get any type of audio or any type of conversations, we had to follow you and try to serve. It's pretty much surveillance, old school
Right,
surveillance. So we
right.
would be outside of your bushes listening to your phone conversations from outside. And there
Uh-huh.
was some gadgets that we did have back then that allowed us to tap into conversations the old school way, if that makes any sense.
Uh-huh. Did you have like the click pens and things like that?
Yes, we
Yeah.
did have the click pens. We did have, the glasses with the camera. I remember
Right.
I had a purse that I would wear, and we had cut out a hole on the side of it. So I would wear it and I would walk around, if I was at a jewelry store at a mall, very nonchalant, and they would videotaping the conversations and the interactions with the other people. So those things are real. So
Okay.
old school.
Wow. Wow. Now, as I ask you questions, if I get into anything that you cannot answer,
Of
feel
course,
free
yeah.
to say that you can't. And if we need to cut, I mean, Hurricane, this is not alive.
Right.
It will be aired, but if we need to cut, we can cut. So I just want to
For
be,
sure.
very
Yeah.
careful about this. But you at one point actually married into the cartel, is my understanding.
I did. I did.
Tell me about
Without
that.
So without knowing, so talk about the irony, right? I'm considered a world-class interrogator, and here I am sleeping with the enemy.
Whoops.
It's crazy. And you know what? You can't make this stuff up because even I was totally taken aback. So the way the story was, me and my husband at the time had been together for 10 years. Had been together for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
Now, during COVID, everything was shut down.
Right.
Everybody was at home and I couldn't travel, so I couldn't do any of my interrogations. I had 6 contracts at the time and I was traveling to California in different areas, but because of COVID, everything was shut down. So
Right.
during that time, I was on a podcast and I came on the podcast and told my story. And one of the guys from the podcast, Mark Wilkinson, he said to me, he said, "You really need to write a book about your life because it is totally insane and it's astonishing." And I had tinkered with the idea of writing a book, a tell-all book, but I
Uh-huh.
knew that it came with consequences because I
Right.
had worked for the government for so long. And if you read my book, I really go in on a lot of things in the book. And so I decided to write the book and I said, you know what, let me just do it because I had the time. So I
Right.
write the book, I write it in 3 weeks. And I
Okay.
always say to people, the 3 weeks was a cathartic experience for me because writing the book was evoking so much emotion. I needed to get it out of my system and
Yeah.
onto paper. And that's why it happened so quickly. So, book is done. It was about my life. I put everything in there, childhood trauma. I unveiled family secrets that people thought were going to the grave. I mean, I talked about everything. Sex,
Okay,
drugs.
let's stop you. Let's stop you there.
Yeah,
Again, how did the family react to that? Now this book comes out and
not
you've
good.
spilled all the tea. So
Not good at
what
all.
happened with that?
There was a lot of things that I uncovered in that book. And really what made it easy for me is I let go of fear of judgment. And I said,
Mhm.
if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And if I'm going to do this, I'm going to break some generational curses as I'm going along.
Good for
Because once
you.
you're in, you're in. So
Right.
it's either 0 or 100. There's no gray area in writing a tell-all book. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to unveil everything that's gone down in my family. There was incest in there. There was a lot of, there was rape. I mean, I talk about everything. I touch a little bit about everything and, molestation and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
And family members were not happy. Till this day, I don't talk to probably like 80% of
Okay.
my
Hmm.
mom's side of the family.
Right.
But this is something that I knew it came with the territory. So I
Right.
knew that if I did this, it was gonna come with some backlash. So
Right.
there are some people that were not happy at all. And of course they claimed it was all a lie. But yeah,
Yeah, the guilty squeak loudest.
right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I unveiled a lot of things, but I will say this, I think that when I did unveil some of the, deep rooted family secrets that were going on, I ended up getting closer to some of my cousins because
Mhm.
then they came forward and said the same thing happened to me. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right. And now that it's out in the air, maybe it will prevent it from happening going forward.
right, definitely. And I think you grow so much when you write something as deep as I did, and the growth is immense. But
Mm.
the outburst that I got back, the positive outburst that I got from people saying, I read your book and it empowered me to tell my truth and break my generational curses and my family bonds and ties. And so that was the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book was always to move, touch, and inspire because I
Yeah.
talk about things that I'm not proud of in the book, but I
Hmm.
also give my audience a look into my life as to this is a tell all. I'm not
Hmm.
perfect. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I
Right.
continue to make a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think the biggest one is, I'm considered one of the best interrogators in the world.
Mhm.
Yet I still married somebody that was not for me, completely not for me.
Okay,
So
let's stop there, okay? So, because this is a real Mr. and Mrs. Smith story.
It really,
So,
is, yeah.
so you're this interrogator. Did your husband know that this was your line of work? And if he did, because husbands and wives talk about what they're doing at work, were you inadvertently, unknowingly feeding him the intel about the work you were doing?
I wasn't. I think a lot of people think that. So he did not marry me to steal secrets because there was really no. I mean, he grew up in the cartel. He was a child of the cartel, and I
Uh-huh.
and I said the easiest way that I can describe it, that's probably closest to what he described to me, was like Ozark, where the kids were just kind of into they became part, it became part of their life, and it
It
became
was their
part of their
life.
existence, right? And when you're a child, you can't really get out of it, and
Right.
so his father started dealing drugs in the millions when he was young and when he was in high school. So the only way that I explain it to people is I grew up in an environment where there was gunshots. So
Mhm.
listening to gunshots was the norm in my neighborhood. So for
Mhm.
him, seeing lots of money, seeing lots of cocaine, seeing lots of drugs and strippers and all that was part of the life because it became normality. And as
Mhm.
crazy as that sounds, that's the easiest way that I can describe it.
Checks out, makes sense to me.
Right.
So here he's in the cartel. When did you come to the realization that he was in the cartel?
He told me. So the way that it all happened, and again, the irony. So when I had my contracts, they all were canceled because I had travel contracts. I'm thinking I'm gonna be at home with the kids. And he was like, no, you gotta go work. So I go and work at the DEA office. So this is
Uh-huh.
the crazy part. I'm here working at the DEA office now. I was working night shift in the wire room because now technology is different. Now we can tap into phones and all that. So I'm working as a
Right.
supervisor in the DEA wire room in Houston. My book is finished. He decides that he wants to read the transcript before he goes to editing. So I said, cool, read it. But red flag number one, when we started dating, he said, I don't want to talk about anything from my past or your past or my childhood or your childhood. I
Uh-huh.
just want to start the relationship from when we met on. And I
I
thought,
bet he
okay,
did.
fine. But red flag number one, right?
Yeah.
Then this story is also in the book. The day of my wedding, I overheard a conversation between him and his dad through the walls.
Uh-huh.
And the dad said to him, don't marry her. She's gonna fuck us over. And I heard that conversation and I went to my best friend who was my bridesmaid and I told her, I'm canceling this wedding. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember because she cried for weeks after this all came out.
Right.
She takes me to the balcony and she's like, look at all these people. Look at this insane production of a wedding that you're having. He is for you. And I remember telling her I wanted to end the wedding because I felt like he was going to turn just like his father. And
Uh-huh.
his father and I never got along because his father
Mm-hmm.
never wanted us to be married.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that was my gut instinct. And because of my friend pursuing
And
me
you
to
didn't
all,
know what his father did.
I didn't know. I didn't know, but I knew that there was just
Wasn't right.
I knew that there was something there. You always know, but you start having children and you start running a business and you get lost in the sauce.
Right.
So anyway, I come home from the DA office, second shift. It's 6 a.m. And he says, I need to talk to you. And I said, can this wait? I'm so tired. And he said, no, I need to talk to you now. So he's like, can you sit? And I said, okay, I sat. Keep in mind, I had my gun on me. I had it in my back holster.
Uh-huh.
So he tells me, he says, I need to tell you something and it's not good. So the first thing that came to my mind was he got
Oh,
another woman pregnant and
oh God.
having his baby. Okay.
Right.
I wish that that's what he would have told me because I think I could have handled that better.
Right.
So he
Right.
tells me, so what he tells me is me and my father had been part of the Mexican cartel. So I literally sit there And I think in like 2 seconds, my brain processes, rage. And I go like this to my gun. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. But then I think about my children and I think, okay, let's calm down. You're a professional. You talk to people like this all day long. So I said,
Okay, now your head has to be about to explode now. Like you said,
yes,
you think about your children, and all of a sudden, your children are the children of the cartel.
yeah, pretty much, pretty
Oh,
much.
wow.
Yeah. And the federal government,
Right?
because there's such a marriage, right?
Right.
So I tell myself, I said, okay, let's separate wife from your profession. And this is me talking to myself. It was like a 1 or 2 seconds, really. And I said to him, and in my mind, I said, okay, interrogate him. Separate your profession from the fact that you're his wife and get all the information out. And I kid you
Right.
not, this is what I said, because I'm the type of interrogator that I don't yell, I don't scream, I talk to people and I get into their mind in a
Mhm.
very finesse way. I'm
Right.
brilliant at this. So the only thing that came out of my mind was, tell me more. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
And people think that it was like this huge, oh my God. No, I cut that off and I said, tell me more. So for the next 2 hours, he literally just told me everything. It just
Wow.
all, and I literally just was looking at him and I'm just nodding my head, okay. And then asking,
But what were you feeling inside at that particular moment in time?
I thought my life was over. And I and
Uh-huh.
I and I explain it like this in the book. I felt like I got hit by a train and I survived. And I was peeling myself off of the rails of the train
Uh-huh.
because it hit me so hard.
Yeah.
And then everything from the last 10 years started rolling through my mind. Just the little
Mhm.
things that I missed, all the red flags finally came to light. And I said, this
And
makes
at the
sense.
at the doorstep of death, your life flashes before your eyes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then after he tells me everything, he says, I feel so much better. And I said, of course you do. Of course you do. This weight have been lifted off of his shoulders. Of course it have. So the only way that I can describe it was I had to have compassion for him in that moment. And I had to go back to the first time that I interrogated a serial killer. The
Right.
only reason that I told myself not to be upset of the things that he was telling me that he had did to children and people was think of him as a child and the
Hmm.
child inside of this man. And that's
Yes.
the only thing that kept me from losing my mind was
Wow.
it's this child that is in this man that got caught up in this and had no choice and was already in it. But and this is why the second book is called The Power of Forgiveness, because I had to forgive him in order for me to continue with my life and
Hmm.
for us to continue having a co parenting relationship with our
Hmm.
children. We made children together. And
Hmm.
ultimately, that's why I didn't kill him, is because of my children.
Right.
What did go through my mind was, deceit and lies. So my entire marriage was fraud. It was complete fraud. So
Uh-huh.
it didn't sit well.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
But here comes the kicker that a lot of people don't understand. And I'm going to break it down to you guys. A lot of people said, you're not a ride or die. And I said to people, ride or die knows what they're getting themselves into. Most cartel wives are aware of what's going on and they choose that life. Now they
Right.
choose to keep their mouths shut and they choose to see and hear certain things, but I
Right.
never chose that. I was never given that option. I was
Right.
lied to and deceived. So then I tell him, I need to report this. And it wasn't because I wanted him arrested. I had to report it because I had given the oath to the government. I
Right.
had said so. And then what people don't understand is if our calls or our conversations were to be tapped, I'm going to end up in federal prison, not
That's
him,
right.
because I gave the oath to the government. I had been working for the government for 18 years with this
Mhm.
type of population. And here I
Mhm.
am married to one. But there is also the big question of who dropped the ball in the government in the background investigations. Because
Right.
I continue to have a top secret clearance and we get investigated every 5 years. So somebody
Right.
knew. Now, what I do explain in the book is that the government agencies, they don't like each other. They don't collaborate with each other. FBI, DEA, CIA, they work independently. In fact,
Mhm.
they hate to work together.
Mhm.
And somebody knew, but the simple fact that I was working for the DEA in the wire room and here I am getting this information, it's insane. It blows my mind.
Do you think that you were set up?
No, I don't think so because his father his father and I never got along ever.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
his father did everything possible to break us apart. I mean, he
Mhm.
did everything possible. So I think that my husband really wanted the girl. And I think he was selfish and he didn't care what I did. And I
Mhm.
think he thought, this is cartel mindset. I'm going to do whatever the hell I want.
But
And I'll do.
do you think you were set up by the government? Do you think that they had that intel and they just didn't tell you? They let you sit there without that knowledge.
No, because whatever I was working on had nothing to do with what they were doing.
Okay.
And so that was one thing because I did get asked that question a lot. Now,
Mhm.
if we were to break it down in a more minute basis,
Mhm.
possibly they could have been something of that nature. But
Mhm.
a lot of the work that I was doing wasn't even in Houston until I started working for the DEA in Houston. And I
Right.
think he started to feel the pressure because of me being in the DEA here in Houston, which is home.
Mhm.
And then now I'm listening to the undercover agents and all the taps that we have on phones and all that stuff here and in Mexico. So I think that really did put pressure on him for
It was
sure. And then
getting
of
too
course,
close to home.
yes, and of course there's a lot of it's just too close for comfort, right?
Right.
But what a lot of people don't realize here in Houston, Houston is the major hub of the cartel. They are bringing in the drugs and smuggling the people and the human trafficking is going on here, but also cartel members are buying buildings, they're buying businesses here to hide money, to wash money, to money launder. And a lot of
I have
people,
a question,
yeah.
at this point, which is I've run through my head several times. Are you in any danger with having made this big reveal?
No, and that's a great question because I get asked this all the time, and I'll tell you why. There's benefits to apparently marrying somebody in the cartel, right? Because we share
Okay.
children together. So why would
Um,
anybody want to harm me? One, I never revealed anybody's names. I don't talk about which cartel. I don't talk about the movements, the plans. There's no really identifiable information that I'm talking about. Really,
okay.
all I'm talking about is what happened to me. In fact,
Right.
I've been talking to cartel members for over 18 years that they knew and they were probably laughing at me. So I was
Okay.
like, I was the, the laughing stock, really, because they
Uh-huh.
were like, look at this woman. She's over here trying to change the world and she doesn't know what she did.
And she's
So,
supposed to be this big time investigator, but she's married the cartel and is still clueless.
right.
Wow.
But in my defense, I always tell people, I married him with the intent to have children and have a home. And I was running a business, working full time. I had two babies under 3 at the time. I was breastfeeding. I was doing this, and this, and that. So my life was really occupied with everything that I was doing that maybe I did miss some things, but I was
Mhm.
just too occupied to even go investigate my own home.
And then there are the rose-colored glasses of love.
Yes. Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
love causes us not to see things that may be just as obvious as the nose on our face.
Right. And then the other thing that happened was, okay, so I had to I had to reveal it to my employer, which at the time was Department of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell this story. When I called my boss, she must have been silent for what seemed like 10 minutes because she couldn't even process what I was telling her.
I'm
And she
sure.
said, she's like, I've never heard this. I don't know how to deal with this. Let me call the higher ups. The higher ups are the Pentagon. That's who I ended up being I ended up going under federal investigation for 7 weeks. So I went under federal investigation because
Wow.
they needed to make sure that I wasn't a double agent and that I didn't marry purposely.
Was
So
there any point that you were worried that that investigation might not go well?
yes, I was terrified. I tell people this reveal and this investigation was the end of the old Angelica. I was murdered, completely devastated. I mean, I literally, there was like a rebirth that happened. And I
Uh-huh.
think in the rebirth was the success of the book, how I got catapulted into motivational speaking. And then people wanted to hear my story over and over. I mean, I literally spun 3 new industries out of the career that I had because I
Mm-hmm.
still got blacklisted from the Department of Defense.
Oh, I'm
So I
sure.
did lose my entire career.
I'm sure. I'm
But
sure.
the funny part that I continue to tell people is doors closed so others can open.
Yeah.
So the book was done, it was finished. I called the publisher, and the CEO of the publishing company will never forget this because we had a global call where I literally reinstated word by word of how I called her. I said to her, because the book was already in editing, I said, I need the book back. I'm adding 2 more chapters to the book. And she
Uh-huh.
said, there's no way that you can do that. You're under federal investigation. And I'm like, I'm still going to do it. She said, there's only one way you can do it. He needs to sign an authorization giving you permission to write what he told you in the book.
Okay.
So the way that I played it was I went to him and I said, you can keep the house, you can keep all your money in all these offshore accounts, you can keep all these, because he had all this money hidden from me. I said, look, I don't want anything. I'm going to take the kids and I'm going to leave. You can keep everything. But the one condition is I need you to sign this authorization. So he said, your stupid little book, sure, I'll sign it. So he signs it. That authorization said that him and his family and anybody else could not come after me legally for the rights that he was giving over for me to be able to write this in the book. But
Wow.
he was thinking his money, his stuff, all that. Yeah, the book hit bestseller. And then eventually I ended up selling the story to Hollywood for a feature film.
Good for
So,
you.
yeah,
Good for you.
crazy,
That that
right?
that well, I mean, you had help coming to um that decision, but that I mean, that was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it really, you know what it is? I felt when you do something for so long and then you lose it and you feel like all of you've done is, because when you go work for the government, you're giving your life away. I could have died so many times doing undercover work and I didn't, but they
Hmm.
were so quick to let me go. But they did give me a condition. The condition was I had to divorce him as soon as possible because when the investigation was over, they tapped the phones, they tapped the emails, they took the laptops, the whole shebang.
Right,
I
right,
got a polygraph. I got interrogated. I was now on the other side of the table. And I remember sitting there like, you're really going to ask me that?
right,
I was like, how am I on this side? I was always on
right,
that side.
right.
And it was crazy. It was a crazy, crazy life. And I remember thinking to myself, because I went through everything, the grief process. I said, how is this my life? And in
Hmm.
that moment, you don't think that this can turn into good or that this can turn into something better. And it absolutely did. So in the lowest, worst moment of my life, the best life was birth. And
Right.
I think that goes with trauma is when something horrible happens, something great is about to emerge. And you never think of it that way until you process it and then until you get through the other side. So
So
I
you've done a lot of grief work, a lot
Yes.
of anger management work,
Yes.
a lot of rebuilding from, past life trauma. There's just been tremendous drama. There's been tremendous pain and tremendous insanity. And
Yeah.
you emerged on the other side with a lot of good things going on. How often do you find yourself drawn back? Because even though we do the grief work and all of the work that we do, that's a huge impact. And we do go back and revisit and reprocess and one step forward and another two steps back, three steps forward, one step back. How often does this come up where you have to revisit those feelings?
I would say it comes up, it's part of my life. I
Mhm,
probably tell my story, twice a week, maybe,
mhm,
sometimes 3 times a week. So it's always there, and it's part of who I am. It's part of my past. It's part of
yeah.
the old person that I pretty much destroyed and rebuilt.
Mhm,
But I continue to do the deep internal work, and I
mhm.
continue to do the finding, because there's pieces left behind that kind of flow into other areas of our life. Obviously with relationships, it's very difficult
Yes.
for me to get back into relationships and really do that thing. I was with somebody for 10 years, and then that person deceived me while I had, his babies.
So you
So
have some trust issues.
I definitely have some trust issues. I definitely have some the story issues. But I will say this, because I'm such an expert in my field, I feel that that came in so handy in dealing with this,
Mhm.
because as interrogators, we definitely compartmentalize things in our minds, and we allow things to not get into our emotional bank. But when
Right,
it's something close to home, it tears us apart.
right.
Sometimes I'll be watching a kid's movie and I'll be in tears, and my kids are like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, Nemo's lost." But
Yeah.
it's really in those moments where your body is trying to just evoke these emotions and get them out
Right.
of your system. So
Cleaning,
that for
cleaning
sure, I
yourself.
definitely deal with it on a continuous basis. Yeah. I mean, how can you not?
Right, right. So what are some of the things that you do to cope? Because you've been through a tremendous amount, and obviously you have tremendous coping skills. I mean, the job that you did gave you some coping skills. Your background, where you came from, gave you some coping skills, and just surviving this mess gave you some serious coping skills. What are your coping skills? What do you do to get through when you're traumatized like this?
Yeah, I do a lot. I'm a big proponent on therapy. Every time I go on podcasts, I talk about therapy, the power of going through things, and the power of unraveling and peeling back the layers of the onion. So therapy, and of course, I'm sure people follow me on Instagram. They see how I work out. I'm obsessed with working out and bodybuilding,
Hmm.
and I script, and I do the grounding and just the self-care, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual.
Right, right. Now, I mean, one of the things that I have to think about in terms of the therapy, you are an ethnic minority,
Hmm.
and so many of the ethnic and racial minorities have a difficulty with the idea of letting somebody else into our heads, particularly if it's not somebody of the same race and culture. How difficult has that been for you?
It has not been difficult, and I'll tell you why. Because so when my friend was murdered, I couldn't sleep. I was having nightmares, and I didn't even know how a 16-year-old would process something like that. But I remember I went into a major deep depression, and it was
Mhm.
my Spanish teacher in high school, Ms. Rudke. She's always out there. She's still alive and she's still listening, and I love her. She sent me a message today. She pulled me out of class and she said to me, "You need therapy." And us, because I'm a minority, I'm Mexican, I'm living in the hood. I don't know what therapy is. We
Mhm.
have no, growing up, it's like, something hurts, walk it off.
Right.
And so she really did save my life. And so I was exposed to therapy when I was 17, and I
Beautiful.
saw what it did for me, and I saw how it healed me, and I saw how we were talking about things about when I was 3 years old and I was being
Hmm.
molested by a
Hmm.
neighbor. It
Hmm.
came out in therapy, and
Hmm.
it was so liberating. And so for me, therapy, and I say this story all the time. If you post a picture of you at the gym every single day, everybody's like, look at her, she's working out. But if I post a picture at the therapist's office every single day, people automatically say, well, what's wrong with her? She's crazy.
Right.
But there's this continued taboo about mental health, when really mental health is self-care. And it's
Right.
so imperative to have it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, we all have mental health issues. We all have pain in life. We all have baggage that we carry in life. And it's illness. I mean, all of us have some degree of mental illness.
Yes,
And, if we had pancreatitis, we wouldn't hesitate to go in to get checked out. If we have diabetes, we go when we get blood test. If we have high blood pressure, we take medication.
right.
And yet, when it comes to mental health, we're so resistant because of the stigmatization that has come with it in the past.
Especially as minorities, because even minorities, they push back even more.
Yes, yes. And I mean, there is that piece of not wanting, especially if the therapist is not of a minority, and in the case of women, if they're not a female, there is that fear of letting them into our heads. What if they mingle what's in there? What if,
Or
it's
manipulate.
again
Yeah,
a trust thing? What if I cannot trust them, whether it be because they are intentionally trying to mess me up, or because unintentionally, because of their own personal perspectives, they are not giving me what I need in order to heal. We're very much frightened of that.
right,
And across the board, pretty much most of the ethnic minority populations, the racial minority populations, have been put upon at some point in time by majority populations. So we all have trust issues.
yeah. First, in some way, shape, or form, I agree, especially as minorities, because we're already having to deal with racial things and neighborhood things and all
Mhm.
types socioeconomic. Yeah. So, and then on top of that, you throw mental health in there, and then the people expect us to be sane, and nobody ever teaches us to take care of our minds and
Right.
even our health. Minorities have the worst health because nobody
Exactly.
teaches us that. So
Exactly.
I agree.
Exactly. So that's why I'm here.
Yes, yes.
I,
Thank
I
you.
want to change that trajectory. It's like, this is the generational wealth that I want
To
to
give back. Yeah.
to give forward, because health is wealth. Health
Health
is
wealth.
more
Yeah.
valuable than all the money in the world. So I want to see everybody, the entire world, heal, and to be in a happy, healthy space. And
Right.
part of that, for many, 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 really probably pretty much all of us, really should entail some form of therapy.
Yeah. And I think now corporations are starting to follow suit, and now you can take mental health days, and
Yes,
they're not going to crucify you for it. And I
yes.
spoke about this in the government. Whenever you kill somebody in the line of fire, you automatically go to therapy. It's
Hmm.
it's it's something that you have to go do. It's mandatory.
Makes
So
sense. Makes
makes sense. I
absolute
mean,
sense.
it's extreme, but it comes with the territory. So
Right, right. And I think one of the good things that's happening right now, we go through these periods in the media and everything where, there's a new buzzword. Every time you turn around, there's a new buzz and some other interest. And right now, we're in the buzz of mental health.
Yes.
And, the celebrities are all revealing, the athletes are all revealing, folks are slinging mud at each other and bringing stuff out into the open. So the media is very, very messy right now. Entertainment's very messy. Sports are very, very messy. But the healthy thing about that is it brings out into the open that these are all people. And these are the people who are supposed to have been successful and supposed to have made it in the world. And yet they have all of these problems bubbling to the surface.
Yeah.
And it
Look,
makes it
you're from Hollywood, so you would know
okay.
all these people with all the money, all the accolades, all the recognition, all the success are the most depressed
That's
because
right.
of everything that they have to deal with, the public eye, the comments, everything. So,
That's right. They have high levels of suicide. Obviously, we see it happening all the time. The children have, high levels of drug use,
yep.
uh, high levels of dysfunction in the homes. I mean, these people have tons of money, and yet when I work with families, some of the most dysfunctional families that I have worked with have been some of the families with the most money.
The most assets. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it is, they live under a microscope, and it
Definitely.
there are lots of pressures. People are like, oh, boo hoo, poor them, but they don't really
No, they live
understand.
on their microscope, and I'm starting to get a little taste of that. So,
Yes, yes. I've been there and done that too. And it was like, okay, well, you know what? There's some pressure involved in it, and when there is a pressure for you to always be on and you
yes.
don't feel on, or, in your case, you've got trust issues with relationships and such, but because you're now coming into your limelight, I don't know if you're in a relationship yet, but if you're not, you already know that people are going to be looking in to see how you handle it.
Right. I know
They're
people
going to
say I
they're going
make
to be
tragedy
looking
look
to see
very
if your next
sexy.
husband is in the cartel.
Right. Yeah. I mean that and it's so funny because people are like, how do you even date? I was at a mental health conference and during the Q&A they said, how do you even date? And because if you tell them, you I can choose not to tell them what I do or what happened or the book. I could choose that route. But then
Mhm.
if they go Google me, then they're going to be mortified. So it's
Yeah.
like,
And in the days
right?
of Google, you can't hide anything.
Right. So it's almost like, let me give you the disclaimer now, and you can
Mhm.
choose to stay or leave. And then, but that just has been the go-to because sometimes that's what you have to do. Honesty is best, I would say.
I would agree. I would agree. So, are you in another relationship?
I have been actively dating, but no, I'm not in an exclusive relationship. And really, I think I have so much going on right now that my time is very limited. I'm a single mother, and so my time is
Right.
very limited and I do so much. So I think there's a time and place, and right now is definitely not the time. So,
Okay. And as a single mother, this is just such a bizarre story. How do you address this to your kids? Because, I mean, it's
yeah.
it's it's kind
Yes.
of sordid, you know?
Yeah. So my
How do
kids
you how do you make it make
yeah,
sense to your kids? How
a
old
great
are your kids
question.
right now?
They're 8 and 5.
Okay, so the
So
8-year-old is enough to start understanding, and then when mommy has a book and a movie, the 8-year-old is definitely old enough
yes,
to,
yes.
to get things coming back. So how do you make all of this make sense for the 8-year-old?
So, I divorced 3 years ago. So at the time she was 5. So
Uh-huh.
she understood that mommy and daddy broke up because of a lie, but
Mm-hmm.
she obviously doesn't know the details of it. She knows about the book, she knows about the movie, she knows that mommy's an author and she speaks and all this stuff.
Right.
But I said to her, there's some lies that have consequences to them and the divorce was the consequence of that lie. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds very, it's very simple. You're really boiling it down, but also I did get both of my kids into therapy after the
Mm-hmm.
divorce. They were in
Good for
therapy for a
you.
whole year.
Good
And
for you.
it's crazy because there is no stigma about therapy in my kids. You know, they were like, we're going to play therapy. It is so much fun. And I
Right.
wanted to instill that in my children that they don't
Hmm.
even, it's not a bad thing. It's you go and you play and you talk to somebody.
Good for
So,
them.
yeah.
And hopefully they'll carry that forward into their life as they become adults and
Yes.
use it as a tool.
Yes. But you know, it's so funny because when I picked a therapist, she was one of the best um, child psychologists here in Houston, and
Hmm.
Dr. Darwin. She's
Hmm.
amazing. But I remember when I went in there and I told her the situation, I told her she needed to read my book so that she can get the backstory into
Right.
what the kids were going to deal with.
Right.
She reads it. She read it in like 2 nights. And she
Right.
calls me and she says, "Oh my God, are you in therapy?" And I said, "I sure am. But I just wanted to let you know what the context behind why I have the kids here." And I think that helped her
Hmm.
with what she was doing with the kids, because as the kids get older, they're going to understand a little bit more.
Right.
And I do feel that the reason why I have made my decisions is, one, I've learned from the past. I had to forgive the killer of my friend in order for me to live, in order for me
Hmm.
to live an unhindered life. And
Hmm.
that, that's part of my Power of Forgiveness speech that was
Hmm.
published in Forbes, is sometimes we can't live our life because we're stuck in the past and what somebody else said or did to us. And if you
Right.
don't forgive, you're stuck in the past and you're allowing that person to have control over you.
Right.
Yeah.
And at what age do you think that you'll finally let your daughter read your book?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I would say I would wait until she's probably at least 16 or
Okay.
15. It probably will happen sooner, right? Because kids nowadays,
Right, because she'll have
well,
access.
yeah, they go on the internet and read all type of stuff. But
Right.
one thing that I do want to specify to her is, I forgave her father, and what he did was obviously wrong, and it had an impact on all of our lives. But
Hmm.
the power of forgiveness, it's like we have to forgive. For sometimes people do things because they had to.
Hmm.
I don't think he necessarily wanted to lie, but I think it was in his like family. It was like
Right.
his family, or kind of, what I think about is the prince. He had to renounce his entire kingdom to go be with Meghan Markle.
Right.
And I feel like that was how he was. He was stuck. Like, do I say something? Do I not? Because when it did come out, oh, it was real bad over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember his side of the family started saying, why did you tell her? She could have gone another 10 years without knowing. So,
Hmm.
but they
Hmm.
don't realize that he just couldn't hold it in anymore. It was eating
Right.
away at him. And so that's when I was able to see the child in him, and the pain in him. So,
Hmm. Now, did this big reveal result in him going to jail?
no, and I will tell you why. The government is not going to waste dollars and or manpower on hearsay,
Hmm.
because they're not going to open a whole investigation. We got tons of investigations going on. We have tons of active investigations going on, and they didn't. They just didn't care. They only
Hmm.
cared whether I was involved or not.
Right.
And he's very successful. And
Uh-huh.
and I feel like the book almost catapulted him because he's in an industry where this type of niche, I guess it's like Wolf on Wall Street kind of situation.
Hmm.
And I feel it catapulted him. He ended up becoming a VP of a company. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So it was in a twisted kind of way a win for him.
in a twisted kind of way. But also, I also tell people, I think when he was younger, and I could say this because it's in the book. When he was younger, I think they were involved more with the actual moving of a product. And
Hmm.
as he got older and started being more professional, they started being more involved with the money laundering side of it,
Right.
the
Hmm.
business side of it. He is a businessman. So
Right.
that's what I always tell people, is there's so many sides to the cartel that
Right.
people are only influenced by what's in the media and the moving of drugs. But there's so much more. There's businesses involved. There's politics involved.
Mm-hmm.
There's military involved. There's a lot of money involved. People are getting paid off. And I describe this in the book, but everybody's just thinking there is thousands and millions of dollars under your floors of your house.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Which is
Wow.
when you watch Queen of the South and stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. So do you watch those shows often, those types of shows?
look, I'm gonna be honest with you. It took me 2 years for me to finally be able to watch Ozark. And I did watch Ozark because I wanted to get a little insight of what it was like when he was growing up. And
Uh-huh.
I would say it's pretty it was pretty good. But the reason why I don't watch those shows is because I know what's really going on. I've been interrogating cartel members, killers, murderers for the last
Yeah.
18 years. I know what's going on. So
Yes.
a lot of these movies and FBI's and CIA's and Homeland, all that stuff is a lot of that stuff is not real.
Yeah.
They glamorize the jobs a lot. And let me tell you,
Yeah.
there's nothing glamorous about being an undercover agent. There was never anything glamorous about it. So,
Right. Right. Yeah. It's the same with medicine. People ask me, oh, well, do you watch this show or that show, this medical show? And it's like, no, I had my elbow up someone's rear. It's
right,
like, it is not
right.
glamorous. It's just not, and no, the doctors and nurses are not all off in the closets together. No, we're too exhausted for any of
For all
that.
that. It's exactly right. Like people are like, the 007s are you really riding in Lambos? And I'm like, guys, we're not a billionaire party stealing diamonds while
Yeah.
people drink. There's no, that stuff does not exist. Even cartel members, like if you look at the biggest cartel members, they're not the ones that own billions and billions of dollars. They're not driving around in Lambos. They're driving around in broke down Toyotas. They're trying to
Mhm.
hide. So that's the
Right.
same thing with Undercover. We weren't, was I sliding down the side of a building? For sure I was, but I wasn't in makeup and a cat suit and looked like Angelina Jolie. No, I was like covered in shit and mud and you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Not exactly a glamorous image.
Yeah, it's not a glamorous job, and undercover work was not made for a woman. And the reason why I say that is because when are we going to go to the bathroom? Where you literally have to pop a squat,
Okay.
you know? I mean, just those things. We were stuck in vans for 24 hours some days. We
And you
could not
can't just
leave.
tinkle in the
Right,
can
right,
discreetly.
right. And so I talk about all this in the book, and I talk about the technology now. Surveillance is so different. We can hack into, computers. We can hack into your phone. We can hack into your alarm system. We can hack into your bank account. This is now, but when I was undercover, none of this existed. The
Yeah.
iPhone didn't come out till 2006, so there was no smartphones up till 2006. So
And
and
how
when
did
the
you
iPhone came out,
feel?
people didn't all get it like now. It's like everybody
Right.
has an iPhone.
Right. How did you deal with your fear during that period? Because there were times where you were really kind of out there by yourself. And I know that, the icy fingers of fear had to grip you pretty tightly. How did you deal with that fear?
I still deal with PTSD.
Mhm.
I'm not one to lie. I deal with PTSD. There was an occasion where I had 10 guns to my head. And I
Mhm.
always tell people, if you've ever had somebody point a gun to you, you will always remember their finger, their hand, and you'll lead up to their eyes, and you will never forget what that person looks like because your
Mhm.
eyes always meet their eyes. And yeah, there's a lot of PTSD there. There was a lot of, sleepless nights. There was a lot of nightmares. There was a lot of sleep medication involved. In my 20s, there was a lot of alcohol consumption.
Mhm.
And I was in my 20s when I did undercover work and surveillance work, and it was very difficult to deal with. But the way I dealt with it was how any other 20-year-old would do, and it would be going out, blowing money, and doing the alcohol drinking. So,
Right.
but as a
Right.
20-year-old, it's almost like expected. You go out and
Mhm.
you get drunk. But
Mhm.
really, I was self-medicating because I
Yeah.
was being emotionally, physically traumatized and exhausted. And I
Yeah.
think we're very adaptable and resilient creatures. And so it becomes our norm. And I
Right.
remember the first time that I ever saw a dead body, a decayed dead body, it had an axe between its head. And I
Mhm.
remember having the bodily experience of throwing up and being
Mhm.
physically ill. And I remember one of the investigators laughing and saying, "You're going to get to the point where you can have your lunch
Mhm.
in front of this dead body." And it's true. It's true. The more you see it, the more you experience it, the easier it gets to deal with. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All I can say is wow. That's,
Yeah.
that's really very, very deep. So, you've been through a lot. Was there ever a moment when you felt like you were literally losing your breath?
Yes. Oh, for sure. All the time. I mean, there was moments where I would say, why am I doing this again? Why am I here? So many times I wanted to quit, so many times that I wanted to throw in the towel. But again, I chose my career based on my pain. And I really went into the government because I wanted to find out why people do such horrible things to other people. I wanted to understand the mind of my friend's killer. How can you cut somebody's head off, arms and legs, and this horrendous thing that he did to them? And so I think I was almost, what's the right word to say? I was traumatized, but I was influenced and I was obsessed with finding out why. And I think that led me down this 18-year career interrogation. And
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy. I'm really good at what I do, and I do it with such finesse. And sometimes I wonder, maybe we were just chosen. Sometimes we were chosen to do
Right.
certain jobs because some people
Right.
are really good at it and some people aren't. And
Right.
I just, I ended up here and I got chewed up and spit out. And it's amazing, because now on this other end, I'm learning about movie production. I'm learning about film production. I know about the book industry. I know how to write books, how to publish books, how to market books. I know about the audible industry. And so you just learn, you continue to learn as an individual as you go through life. And I think that's very beautiful to share with people because when you're in despair and trauma, you think your life is over and you think your life is always going to be in that moment. And it's not.
And I think that it does help to think about that moment, no matter how low or how dark it may seem, to think about that moment as something that's strengthening you and preparing you for something better that is to
Yes.
come, something very different
Yes.
than the
And it
moment that
gives
you're
people
in.
hope. It
Yes.
gives people hope. And I'll tell you this funny story. When I divorced, I went into divorce care. For those that don't know what it means, it's like little counseling when you're going through a divorce. And I remember when I walked in those doors, I was just sitting there and everybody was talking about, their infidelities and he slept with the barista at the Starbucks. And then everybody was looking at me waiting for my story. And I said, let me tell you, I'm gonna give you guys a disclaimer. Everybody that has infidelity, I wish my story was that. And I'm gonna make
Uh,
you feel better about your story. And sure enough, everybody's mouth was on the ground. And they said,
right?
"Oh my God, I feel so much better about my divorce." So even that, even that made a difference for somebody else. So I just turned it. I always just turn it and say, people think that your life is over. Somebody dies or somebody gets killed or financial or romantic or everything. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. They don't say that because it's not true. It's definitely true.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing this phenomenal story with us. I mean, this was deep,
Yes, for sure. You're welcome.
So, Angelica, we've enjoyed having you here on the show, and we look forward to the book. Can you tell us again what the name of the book is?
So book one is called Through These Brown Eyes. It's a memoir through my brown eyes. And I just talk about life as a child, life as an adolescent, life in the government, and then obviously leading towards the end. and it got picked up to be made into a featured film with a spin-off series in Hollywood. So we are working on that. Writers are writing, and
Mhm.
the name of the movie will be Veritas, which
Uh-huh.
means the truth in Latin. And then I'm working on book two, which is a continuation of book one, and that's called The Power of Forgiveness.
Wow.
You can get it on Amazon and Audible, book one, which is this one.
Perfect. Perfect. Hey, Hurricane, do you have any
He's been so
questions?
quiet.
Yeah, I'm sure his mouth was unhinged, you know?
Yeah, he's like a sponge.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, you closed it well with it is in the movies and it's definitely coming up. And I mean, I was watching and listening and I'm just laughing. It is a movie, it really felt like an actual movie that you would watch, and we've seen some movies of those, and I think you've talked about the series, Queen of the South. I think that's
Queen
the
of the
one.
South,
Yeah,
yeah.
you mentioned that. I mean, Ozark and all these. I mean, these are things that we've seen. I mean, Bad Boys. I mean, there's a little bit of Bad Boys in there. DA agents, his sister, and I think
Right.
Bad Boys too. And you got all that stuff, and it is a crazy story. I mean, when you think about it from everything. I mean, I do have a couple. I mean, I think Doctor, you've covered a few ones that I had, but it's okay. But here's the thing. One is that he married you, but he knew what you did. You didn't know what he did.
Yes.
Yeah, which is like, I mean, to your point, I guess it was love. He wanted it so bad, he got it and doesn't matter. But it's funny because he knew that eventually this is not going to go any further, and you got into the wiretap unit. That's it. I mean, this is going to be a wrap. It's only a matter of time before you catch him, and then it would be a worse thing. So he came clean. But you got to think about it. I mean, if you think about the mind right here, is that the folks of that nature, they would be hiding in plain sight as they do, right? Everything around. I mean, you would know. And he was right there. I mean, that's like being the best, incognito status that you can have
Right,
with a
hiding
federal
in
agent.
plain sight.
Literally, I mean,
Right.
right there. Who would have thought? And frankly, as you had said, I think, Doctor, you asked the question about whether the agencies knew about it. I mean, you're right. I mean, you guys go through.
I think one knew for sure. I think one knew.
Well,
Yeah.
so there's a whole question about that person and why they didn't spill the the beans out there. But here's the thing, though, you're right. The investigation stuff that you have to go through as an agent over and over, it's continuous, and I mean, obviously the dude was pretty well covered. I mean, that didn't come up. I mean, because it takes 2 years at least, for the initial onset when you actually get into something. And the reason I know, because I was going to be one of those agents myself. I actually had applied, and there was a reason I didn't get in, but the fact is that was going to be a whole 2 years, preview on my life story before I actually even get, picked. And so it is an interesting concept where people, watching and listening right now is like, why no one caught it? No one picked it up. And you're right. You could have picked it up too. He did it well. I mean, I have to say, the guy was good. He did a great job about this to cover all his tracks and
Mhm.
and live a life, of. I mean, talking about a spy life, this is 007 in the making.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Mr. and
definitely
Mrs. Smith, I mean,
Mr. and
I
Mississippi. I
mean,
mean, you're right.
there was a lot of things that I could tell that even would be more flags, but like I said, like we never shared accounts. I never had access to his accounts, all that stuff that a lot of people would bring up. And I was just like, well, this is how we do it, but there was ways that I could have gotten more information, but I just, I was so busy doing everything else. And I trusted him. I never thought that this would ever come up.
Oh, the,
you
So
were
well,
alone.
well, the other thing is, you wouldn't think that if it was that, he would have kids with you and stuff like that. I mean, that's the other part, right? I mean, you would think that, this is somebody that's going to put his family and kids in jeopardy in this case. And yet it didn't stop. I mean, you have kids now and they're growing and they will know, who the dad is. And I'm
right.
sure there's still a relationship there, which is, I can just imagine as they grow up. I mean, that's going to be another work for them because
It really
think
is.
about,
That's
think
going to
about
be a
like
lot of work.
everybody. Oh yeah. I mean, people are going to be like, oh, you're the daughter, you're the son of such and such, there
Yeah.
would be great fame in there, but there also great shame in there as well, because people are going to try, how people are brutal, the bullies out there, right? They're going
Right.
to do their work, oh, and it's going to be tough. And then, of course, the dad is there as well, and the family is still there. So you got all these things, And you're right. You spoke about a couple things, such as the idea of that, you know, he hasn't gone to jail, and although people know, the agency knows what, but you're right. They might be, maybe, unless he's linked to somebody else's, investigation, and somehow it comes from that route. That could still happen, but who knows, right? The other part that I just wanted to touch on is that, sadly, that after all the work you did, 18 years, you were dismissed because of something. Obviously, I get it. You should have been the first one to catch this, and you didn't. And you can say, well, you should have caught up that in the investigation, and you didn't. So who the hell to
Right.
blame?
Right.
Somebody's going to be a scapegoat, and guess what? That
And it
was
was
you.
me, right?
But
It was
but
definitely me.
but for people that are watching or listening, as you said it best, is that sometimes bad outcomes create better outcomes.
Yes.
Because really that's what happened. You had a bad outcome, but what you are today is a much better situation in life. Plus, your experience and expertise is still with you, and now you're putting out there to podcasts, to the shows, to the movies,
Yeah,
to
I'm a
your
consultant
speakers.
now.
Yeah.
Exactly, and you know your
And
stuff.
here's the thing, I still work for the government. They still engage me. Now, it might not be Department of Defense, but it's other agencies. And I think
Right.
that was another question was, what does blacklist mean, right? So when you're blacklisted from a specific agency, you're specific blacklisted from that agency because the agency has only jurisdiction over them, but they don't say, oh, you're blacklisted from the government. That comes from higher levels.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah.
you have talent in quite a few other agencies. I think that
Right.
you'll be good in a lot of areas that are there's a lot of different levels in there, and a lot of task force and things like that. So you'll be just fine. And plus, now you also can start to Hollywood. I'm sure you're gonna have multiple movies and stuff, and your expertise is just gonna be up there. And hey, listen, this is just the beginning of a
Yeah.
long run. So hey, I mean, well, first of all, congratulations on the work you do
Thank
now, and
you.
the
Thank you.
speaking
And then did you
and engaging.
see, Cheryl, I was published in Forbes for the second time today. So
I did. I did. I sent it over to Hurricane, and we'll be posting that up with this show. So
That's
I did,
Forbes
and we're
Morocco,
very
right?
excited for you.
yeah, so Forbes Morocco published me last year as The Power of Forgiveness, my TEDx speech. They gave me my own article, and then they decided they were going to put me in CEOs to Watch for 2023, and I ended up on there with Alex Ormasi. I'm a big fan of Alex, so now it's like the levels of elevation have gone up now, and people say, "Oh my
Beautiful.
God, you should be so excited." I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm very pressured to upkeep this, that I can't believe they even put me with him, but I landed there. So yeah,
But this is good pressure. This is
this
good
is
pressure.
good pressure for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just have one question because
Yeah.
what Hurricane was saying, and we're going to wrap this up. But what Hurricane was saying actually evoked another thought. You are still raising children with this man. Are you all on good terms?
We
In
are on good terms, and we obviously I have more custody of the kids than he does, but yeah,
Mhm.
we're still co-parenting,
Good
and
deal.
yeah, yeah, and that was a choice that I decided to make. If we went to trial, it would have been televised. It would have been crazy high profile, but we decided to settle it out of court. So yeah, so we have a great relationship. We deal with what we need to deal with, and if you were to ask him, he will just deny everything, but
Right,
deny.
right. Of
Because he
course.
has he has been, the people that have found who he is and what he does, it has landed over there, and he just denies it. Which is a
Uh,
fifth right, so Fifth Amendment right.
right.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, I am, like I said, I'm thrilled that we were able to do this interview with you. And certainly we want right of first refusal
yes,
to be the ones to interview you when the movie comes out.
for sure. I will invite you guys to the premiere for sure.
Yay.
Especially you, Cheryl, you're already there.
Yes, we'll be excited about it. And, certainly, as soon as you know that it's coming out, let us know. We'll rebroadcast the show. We'll put out the information and encourage people to come and see it because
For
I know
sure. It's
this
gonna
is
be
going to
it's gonna
be
be
a great
exciting.
movie.
It's really exciting for sure.
When do you think that it's slated to come out?
So we got backtracked with the writer's strike.
Of
crazy. I
course.
mean, yeah, I think it's almost like a year that everything got stopped, so now everything is
Yeah.
behind. So the writers are barely starting to write the script. So it's
Right.
good. I would say it's probably gonna be another year and a half,
Okay.
if anything, because we're doing, we're picking actors and writers and permits and the whole shebang. It's a lot of fun though, for sure.
Any good
Okay.
actors we should be looking forward to?
We are not allowed to disclose
No
who we're
names.
thinking, but they all are all A-listers for sure.
Okay.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Cool.
okay. I would definitely count us in.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
could say some of the girls that I obviously not the main one, but we did think Selena Gomez, she was up there. And who else was up there? There's this girl, the girl that played, I can't remember her name, I just drew a blank. But it was like we had thrown a lot of girls up there, and some of them were older and younger. And then we even thought about the girl that played Wednesday to play
Uh,
like the younger version of me while I was an actual undercover agent, because when I was
right.
undercover, I was 23 to 25. So
Uh-huh.
she would be great. I
Right.
can't think of her name, but
I can't think of her name either, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
Ortega, I think is
I
her
love that
last
show.
name. Yes, yes, and she played Wednesday, so I think she would be good. So she was a couple of those names that we had for the role, for my role. But
Uh-huh. Cool. Cool. Well, we will definitely be looking forward to it. And again, we thank you for coming on the show with us. We thank you, the listening audience, for joining us for this exciting show. And we will keep you posted as we find out more about when the movie will be out. The book Veritas is on Amazon, so go out and get your copy. Obviously, this is going to be a fascinating read, and I'm betting that just like the editor, that you will not put it down. So go get your copy of Veritas. And
so Veritas is the name of the movie, and Through These Brown
okay.
Eyes is the name of the book.
Oh yeah, that's right. Through these brown eyes, through these brown eyes. So I'm definitely rushing out to get my copy of the book. And again, thank you all for being with us for Chatters That Matter. Let's talk about it. I am your show host, Dr. Cheryl Bryant Bruce, MD, the celebrity doc, here with my co-host, Hisham Ellen Mate, Hurricane H. And we have been interviewing the fascinating, fabulous, beautiful Angelica Robles. So this show, like every other show, uh, when it's over, we'll go on to YouTube. You can find the show on all of the different platforms, and it's also on the radio. Make sure that you go to the show, share it with your friends, hit those like buttons, leave us your comments. Again, thank you for joining us on Chatters That Matter, and we will see you again on the next episode.